Welcome to the Marketing Behind Rapid Growth, the podcast where we explore the strategies, decisions, and growth engines behind some of the world's most successful technology companies. Today, we're talking about Twitter. Picture a teenager in St. Louis, sitting alone with a police scanner crackling in the background. He's not interested in the voices, he's interested in the movement, ambulances, taxis, fire trucks. He starts teaching himself to program just so he can map where they all are in real time. That teenager was Jack Dorsey, and what he was really chasing, without knowing it yet, was a way to watch a city breathe. This obsession would sit dormant for years. It would survive a shelved prototype, a career in dispatch software, and a false start on an early mobile device that nobody was ready for. And then, almost by accident, it would collide with a failing company at exactly the right moment. This is the story of how that collision became Twitter, a platform that turned a hard technical limit into a global voice, let its own users write the rulebook, and figured out something most companies never do. Sometimes the best marketing isn't something you buy. It's something you build directly into the product. Let's start with the moment everything was set in motion. Part 1. A company in trouble and an old idea resurfaces. By 2006, Evan Williams had already changed the internet once. He built Blogger, sold it to Google, and helped define what it meant to publish online. His new venture was a podcasting company called Odeo. But Odeo had a problem. Apple had just folded podcasting directly into iTunes. Overnight, the reason Odeo existed started to evaporate. Williams did what smart founders do when the ground shifts under them. He asked his team to brainstorm, not incremental fixes, new directions entirely. And this is where timing becomes everything in our story. SMS texting was already deeply embedded in Europe, and it was surging in the United States. The internet at the time was full of long-form blogs and increasingly complex social networks, like MySpace and a rising platform called Facebook. But there was a gap. Nobody had built something low-friction, immediate, and built for mobile life. Nobody had built a dispatch system for the everyday. Jack Dorsey's old idea, the one about broadcasting your status to the world in real time, suddenly had a home. Part 2. Building around a wall, not around a vision. Here's where the story gets interesting, because Twitter's defining feature wasn't the result of some grand strategic insight. It was the result of a constraint nobody could avoid. Dorsey, working with Odeo colleagues Biz Stone and Noah Glass, built a prototype in about 2 weeks using Ruby on Rails, a framework that was itself brand new. They called it Twitter, borrowing the vowel-dropping style of Flickr and the 5-character shortcodes used in SMS at the time. And the product was organized around one number, 140 characters. That number wasn't inspired, it was arithmetic. SMS messages were capped at 160 characters, and the team reserved about 20 of those for a username. What was left was 140. But here's the strategic lesson hiding inside that technical detail. The limit forced compression. It forced clarity. It made every message punchy, easy to consume, and critically easy to share. A wall became a feature, and that pattern turning a constraint into a defining strength is one we'll come back to throughout this episode. There's a second layer to this founding moment that's worth sitting with. The team wasn't entirely aligned on what they'd built. Dorsey saw a personal status updater, a way to answer a simple question: what are you doing right now? Williams, shaped by years in blogging and publishing, saw something else, an information network, a window into what's happening in the world. That tension between personal broadcasting and real-time news wasn't a flaw the team needed to resolve. It became the hybrid engine that made Twitter useful to completely different types of people, from a friend sharing lunch plans to a journalist breaking a story. Part 3. When the users become the product team. Now, if you'd used Twitter in its earliest days, you'd have run into what became known as the fail whale, an illustration of a whale hoisted up by a flock of little birds that appeared whenever the site buckled under its own traffic. And it buckled a lot. In most companies, that kind of instability kills a product before it gets a second chance. Users don't tolerate a product that doesn't work. But something different happened here. Users stayed. Not because the outages didn't matter, but because the core experience underneath them was magnetic enough to outweigh the frustration. That loyalty gave Twitter something rare, a community patient enough to keep shaping the product rather than abandoning it. And shape it they did. Some of the most iconic pieces of Twitter weren't invented by the company at all. The @ symbol used to reply to someone. The hashtag used to organize conversation around a topic. The retweet used to amplify someone else's voice. Even the word tweet itself. All of it came from the community, not from a product roadmap. The critical decision Twitter's leadership made here wasn't building these things. It was noticing them. They watched the informal paths users were already carving through the product, and instead of resisting or ignoring them, they paved those paths into official features. That's a subtle but powerful distinction. They acted like editors, not dictators. And that posture, watching before dictating, is a big part of why early users felt a genuine sense of ownership over what Twitter became. Part 4. The marketing moment that changed everything. Now let's talk about how the world actually found out about Twitter, because this is where the story shifts from product design to something close to marketing legend. In March 2007, at the South by Southwest Interactive Festival, the Twitter team made a choice that looks almost too simple in hindsight. Instead of buying a conventional booth, they spent roughly $11,000 on 2 large screens placed in the main hallways of the convention center, streaming a live feed of tweets about the event itself. Think about what that actually did. Attendees weren't being told about a new product. They were watching their own words, posted moments earlier, appear on a giant screen in front of them. It was show, don't tell, played out in real time and in public. The results were immediate. Daily tweet volume jumped from around 20,000 to more than 60,000 over just a few days. Twitter won the festival's Web Award. And when Dorsey accepted the award, he reportedly thanked the crowd in exactly 140 characters, or fewer, then pointed out that he'd just done it. That single detail, turning the acceptance speech itself into a demonstration of the product, tells you everything about how Twitter thought about marketing. The product wasn't something you talked about. It was something you did in front of people. Part 5. The tweet as a marketing unit. South by Southwest was a spark, but the sustained fire came from something structural. The tweet itself was built to travel. Because each message was short and self-contained, it could be lifted out of Twitter entirely and dropped somewhere else. Embedded in a blog post, read aloud on television, screenshotted into a news article, forwarded across completely different platforms. Twitter became something like the real-time wire service of the internet, the place where breaking news, public statements, and live reactions surfaced first, often before traditional media had caught up. And once journalists and public figures started treating it as a direct broadcast channel, something remarkable happened. Every single tweet quoted on cable news or printed in a newspaper functioned as free advertising for the platform itself. Twitter didn't need to buy that attention. It engineered a product where the content itself did the distribution work. That's the core of product-led marketing. The cheapest, most durable growth engine is a product people want to quote. Part 6. Growth through the chaos. It's worth pausing here to acknowledge that none of this unfolded smoothly from a leadership standpoint. Dorsey was pushed out of the chief executive role in 2008 and wouldn't return to it until 2015. The company cycled through other leaders in the years between. That kind of turbulence would derail most products. But Twitter's underlying gravitational pull held steady. Larger, better-resourced companies reportedly considered building their own versions. None of them succeeded in replicating what Twitter had, because what Twitter had wasn't just software. It was a dense, living network of real-time conversation that its own users had spent years building. One tweet, one hashtag, one retweet at a time. That kind of network isn't something you can manufacture from scratch. It has to be earned. Part 7. What this story teaches us. So what do we take from all of this as builders and marketers? First, constraints can become features. The 140-character limit started as a technical compromise dictated by SMS. It ended up being the single most recognizable thing about the product. A limitation, framed well, can become your brand. Second, let your users help author the product. Twitter's most enduring conventions weren't invented in a boardroom. They came from the community. The company's job was to notice and formalize, not to control. Third, make the product its own marketing channel. Twitter didn't out-advertise anyone. It outshared everyone because it engineered shareability into the smallest unit of content it had. And fourth, a beloved core can survive a rough edge. The fail whale became a running joke. precisely because the thing underneath it was worth waiting for. Reliability matters, but desirability, when it's strong enough, can carry a product through real instability. Conclusion. Twitter's story starts with a teenager fascinated by the quiet choreography of a city in motion, ambulances, taxis, dispatch calls, all tracked in real time. It ends with a platform that gave the entire world a new, compressed way to speak, and then simply got out of the way and let that world spread the word. The deeper lesson here isn't really about social media at all. It's about where growth actually comes from. It rarely comes from a marketing budget bolted on after the fact. It comes from decisions made inside the product itself, constraints that sharpen it, communities that extend it, and content built from the very first character to travel. This was the marketing behind rapid growth. See you in the next episode.